Welcome. We are going to dive into some of the really powerful shifts that are about to take place now that Uranus has entered into Gemini. So much big revolutionizing and radicalizing energy that is happening for us right now because Uranus went from Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign, now into Gemini, which is a mutable air. It is like night and day. And so, in this particular video, I am going to talk about what it means, what we can expect, what are the big changes and shifts that we can expect kind of on the horizon with this particular kind of transit that's going to last until 2033. It is not a short-term situation. This is something that we're gonna be dealing with for multiple years, and just like when Uranus was in Taurus, it had a very specific impact on the world, the collective consciousness, and also each of us individually. So, let's look at all the things. First of all, I really want to talk about what Uranus represents because until we actually have some clarity on how Uranus functions as an archetype, as a planet, what kind of messaging it's really trying to relay into the world, we're not going to know how to really deal with that energy because just like all of the planets, there are archetypes associated with their personalities. And so when you really start getting into more of like an embodied astrology, which is what I practice, which is what I love. It's like, it's not just about observing these patterns, right? It's not just about looking at the degrees and all of these are very important things, the degrees and how the geometry, because there's certain relationships between certain angles that are very good or positive, flowing, they're easier, they're harmonious. And then there's others that are more polarizing and kind of strenuous and can create tension and challenges. And so we want to be able to look at all of these pieces so that we can establish a very accurate forecast and understanding how these energies are working with each other. But we also really want to understand what the archetypes of these planetary personalities are too, because every single human being works with archetypes. It is a very subconscious, unconscious thing. And I love working with archetypes because I think it's just fun to play around with these different roles, the beliefs and the thought processes that are also kind of connected to these particular roles and identities and how they express themselves. And so looking at Uranus, it is definitely one of those outer planets. When it moves around the sun, it actually takes 84 years. That's really important to know because around 40, 42 years old is when a human starts to go through their Uranus opposition. That means that Uranus is in the opposite side of the sky from when you were born. And so, with that opposition, the sun opposing Uranus in your natal chart, it actually can be indicative of one of those like midlife crises things. So, an identity crisis, a midlife crisis, is basically when Uranus is shining a light and kind of exposing different things within the identity that may have been suppressed, may have been subdued. There is a radicalization, a self realization. There are certain things that all of a sudden start to become very clear within your own mind and consciousness. And so, it's just very interesting how Uranus functions. And so, with that being said, anybody who was born between 1941 and 1949, you are in your Uranus return. Okay, so that means that Uranus is going back to the place that it was, and it's going back to the native place that it was when you were born. And so that is a really big deal too, because it is one of those outer planets that like, we go through Venus returns, Mars returns, solar returns every year for our birthday. What that really just means is that that particular celestial body has gone back to the place where it was when you were born. And so a Uranus return takes 84 years for Uranus to go around the sun. So it takes 84 years for you to be in that return. So for all of those individuals who are probably like those earlier baby boomers, anybody who was born between 41 and 49, this is that Uranus return for you. So let's look at how Uranus functions. Uranus is a planet that it is a lot of shock value, surprises. Like I said before, there's a lot of like radicalization. There is revolutionizing. It is spontaneous, but it also loves humanity. Uranus is connected, directly connected to Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius. It's directly connected to the 11th house in astrology, which is also about communities, associations, friendships, networking, socializing, bigger scale humanitarian efforts, the global capacity of consciousness. Like it's actually really big. And it has like this way of functioning where it doesn't necessarily, it's not about flow. It's not about like just like kind of easing into something. The archetype of Uranus is about shocking you, poking you, provoking you into some sort of like reality. Like sometimes it feels like maybe you've been walking in a fog. Sometimes it feels like maybe the walls have been closing in. Maybe it feels like you've been really trying to move this energy from one thing to another, right? And so you've been pushing against it, pushing against it. And then all of a sudden Uranus comes in and it's like there's just like this pivot, this very quick shock and pivot. And all of a sudden now things are different and things are changed. And so it has a quality about it that really values freedom and independence. And like I said, like that revolutionizing energy, innovation, progression. Like it does not want things to stay stale or stagnant. It wants things to move and it wants to improve things along the way, and it's not afraid of ruffling feathers to get things moving in the right direction. So that is the archetype there. And so when we have the ability to hold that archetypal energy within ourselves, then we are also like within our own natal chart. Like my Uranus is in Sagittarius, which is interesting because I am currently in my, well, I'm actually just coming out of it, my Uranus opposition. Okay. So it's a direct polarity. Okay, so it's like my Uranus is in Sagittarius. Uranus for me within Sagittarius in my natal chart is all about being able to support certain social structures by teaching and guiding in big ideas, philosophies, rallying people together towards like spirituality, higher learning. There's very particular ways that Uranus and Sagittarius works, and that is my natal placement. However, we're going to look at how it works in Gemini. But first, I also want to give a little bit of a backstory as to what Uranus was like when it went through Taurus, because that is what we are coming out of. That is the energy that it has been in for 8 years. Okay, so since 2018, and I want you to just take a moment, think back to where you were in 2018, the different things that were going on in your life at that time. So I can tell you right now that in June of 2018, we bought this house. Okay, in June of 2018 was when we purchased our house. And so when it comes to Uranus and Taurus, Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So fixed earth sign Taurus is very grounded, very rooted. It is patient, it is determined, it is purpose driven. Taurus is very embodied and is very connected to financial systems as well as nature based themes, environmental themes. And Uranus is not very comfortable in Taurus because Taurus is not a sign that is anything radical. Taurus loves safety and security and stability. And that's kind of the thing that Uranus is kind of fighting against a little bit. And it's not that Uranus doesn't appreciate stability. It only appreciates stability when it is created in the most aligned way. So it's like if it is performative stability, if it is transactional like stability, like it's conditional stability, like that is not true stability. We have to cultivate that stability from within us. And I feel like what has happened throughout that entire transit from 2018 to now with Uranus being in Taurus has really showed us all of the areas in our life that we don't feel safe. It has poked and prodded in different areas of our identity that are not safe. And we may have thought they were safe, but they're not. And that's where the interesting things comes in, right? Like there is an air to Taurus energy that is like, I have control. I have everything under control. I'm in control. And it's not like a charged control of like authoritarian nature. It's just like a grounded, secure, stable, I know I have control. And if there is an illusion about that control, which we do have a lot of illusions about control, we think that because things look a certain way, that life is in control. that because I go to the same job every day, life is in control, that there's certain things that are predictable and comfortable, and therefore I have control. Throughout that transit, Uranus was really showing us where we didn't have all the control that we hoped that we had. And so that was kind of a challenging transit. Uranus is not comfortable in Taurus. Okay. However, now that it has thrust completely into Gemini, let's talk about what Gemini represents because it is a very drastic change from Taurian energy. So when we look at the archetype of Gemini, this is a mutable air sign versus a fixed earth. Fixed earth, you cannot budget. It is literally like looking at a massive bull that's standing in a pasture and you're just like, go go, right? And you're pushing on it and you're like putting your shoulder into it. And it doesn't matter if you're pushing it, it doesn't matter what you do, how strong you are. If that ball doesn't want to move, it isn't going to move. And so that is a lot of that really tough, stubborn energy. But now into mutable air, very, very different. And maybe you have felt that all of a sudden it seemed that some of the areas of your mind, your identity, like different ways that you have felt and experienced your life are all of a sudden starting to completely transform. And it's because Uranus is much more comfortable in Gemini. Okay. So this is all going to be very good for us over the next like 8 or so years because Uranus is actually very comfortable in Gemini. But I said that Uranus rules over Aquarius. It is affiliated with Aquarius. It's affiliated with the 11th house in the zodiac. And Aquarius is an air sign. It's a fixed air sign, but it's an air sign. And so, what that tells me though is that Uranus is affiliated with air and Gemini is air. And these two get along a lot better together. Okay. Because Uranus wants to be able to communicate, it is very mind and intellectually oriented. But so is Gemini. Gemini, being mutable air and represented by the twins, really wants to connect and communicate. Okay. So the twins are like, we have this connectivity with each other, right? We're bouncing things back and forth. We have a dialogue, we have reciprocity, we have balance, we have something that can going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so this is just one of the very interesting ways that this sign functions. Gemini rules over the lungs, which was about respiration, is about air, about being able to speak and communicate, right? And so also Gemini is affiliated with Mercury. So we want to look at the fact that Gemini is very, very, very communicative, ideas driven, thought based, travel, languages, linguistics, contracts, anything that is written word, record keeping, anything that is speaking, sharing, connecting verbally, anything that would be a translation from one language to the next. This is all Gemini energy. But the other thing about Gemini is that it is very connected to our nervous system. So that's why I said when Uranus started to move into Gemini, I think a lot of people, and myself included, without even realizing it, it was like, something feels different. I walk my dog every morning and it's kind of my time for meditation and prayer and just kind of connecting and speaking and embracing the day and kind of receiving messages and stuff like that. And it was literally the day of, and I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just like something is different. Something is different about the way that I feel in my own body. You know what I mean? There is definitely a rewiring that is happening because when Uranus is in Taurus, it is not that same rewiring. It is kind of like, I would say that the past 8 years, there were some elements of real discomfort because it felt like you couldn't make the kinds of changes that you wanted to make because that's what Uranus wants. It's like, this doesn't work. Let's change it. This isn't fit. Let's change it. This isn't happening the way, like it could happen better. Let's change this. We don't need to wait this long. Let's collapse time around this. Let's innovate. Let's get this moving. Let's try this. And so it's a very like, let's troubleshoot. Let's keep trying. It's very Thomas Edison with the light bulb. Okay. Because, how many times has he tried to create this light bulb? He tried like 10,000 times, and then he finally came out with the right one, but he didn't quit. He didn't stop. He kept innovating. He kept changing the process. He kept observing different things about that process and being like, okay, this variable, let's play around with this. Let's see what works about that. All right, let's change this variable. Let's see what works with that. Right. And so it's always trial and error. It's about experience. It's about building experience and wisdom over time. And so that is not necessarily the most comfortable thing to do in Taurus when Taurus is like, I'm not willing to move. I'm not willing to move. I'm not willing to move. And so now that it's in Gemini, I was like, all of a sudden, like, like what a breath of fresh air, you know? But I will say that, as we are redefining things, like things are being redefined right now and rewired. And when it comes to Uranus and Gemini, you can expect that there's going to be revolutionizing around communication systems, travel. We've already seen now, like Spirit Airlines just closed. Okay. But it's shaking things up within the travel industry. I was supposed to take a big trip in October. I was supposed to go to France and actually getting bumped to April of 2027 now because of all of the things that are going on with the Middle East conflict and the war in Iran and all of the different changes that are happening with access to jet fuel and gasoline and oil all around the world right now. So you can expect that there are going to be radical shifts in travel. There's going to be revolutionized ways in communication. And I know that the first thing that you may think of is probably the advancements of AI, but I don't know. Like, yes and no. I actually think it's much bigger than that. I don't think it actually has to do with Uranus does oversee technology and medical advancements. Gemini also has a very strong connection to technology. So I can see how this relationship with Uranus and Gemini is absolutely going to probably create some massive upgrades, right? In communications around the world. But I actually think it's going to be bigger than that because when we're also looking at travel, we're looking at the fact that, Artemis 2 is now becoming Artemis 3, and they do plan on going to the moon. And I do feel that, especially with some of the predictions that are coming through for this year in 2027, there is going to be communication outside of the dimension of this planet. I believe that there are going to be some much bigger communications that happen. It's not like, oh, yeah, what's happening with AI? I honestly could care less. Big bye. I think that it could be a really useful tool. I feel like it can definitely help you in a pinch if you have a question or you need some support with something, but it is not something that I recommend that people rely on it. You know what I mean? We've got to remember, and I do think this is an important part of Uranus and Gemini, is that we've got to remember that we came here with our own intellect. We have our own intellect to cultivate and to nurture. We have our own communication skills that we can dive more into. Do you feel like you need to be more bold in your communication? Do you feel like it's time for you to start actually asking for what you want? It's time for you to start really, really expressing what your needs are, you know? My point is that, like, I understand where some people who are probably also interpreting the Uranus and Gemini transit and how that's going to impact technology and AI communication and stuff like that. Like, yes, I do see that, but I don't think it's going to be the most prominent thing that we see advancing over this 8-year transit, to be completely honest. I think there's going to be a revolutionary change in how people think. I think that more people are going to realize that this was fun. It was really cool to be able to hop on this and use this bot and get all of this information and utilize this resource to simplify my life and get from A to B much faster because it helped me understand things in a different way. And it kind of did all the thinking for me. And that is actually not the direction that I feel like we want to be moving towards because your mind is really the most powerful part of the human. Like, yes, the heart, yes, the soul, yes, the vessel, everything needs each other to exist, but the mind is a very, very, very powerful tool because your mind is what creates. So you can have a really strong heart resonance. You can have a really old soul. You can have a very strong and fit body. You can have, all of these particular things in place for you as a human. But how it all gets translated in the mind is a very, 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 very essential thing to each human being. We cannot escape that. We all have ways that our mind interprets things, and then the way that it sends and translates those interpretations down into the body and then where the body holds it and how it holds it. And I do think that there's going to be some very big revolutionizing there because of the way that different things are held within the body, within the nervous system. I do think that Uranus and Gemini is going to rewire a lot of the different archetypes that we've been playing at. And it's actually going to change us into a more authentic identity because of the ways that we have held ourselves back or the way that different circumstances in our lives have held us back. I think there's going to be a radical shift in how we see ourselves. I do think that when I see Gemini energy, I always think like mirror, mirror. You know what I mean? Like you've got these two twins that are mirroring back to each other. And I think that when Uranus comes into Gemini for us on an individual level, there's definitely the things that are happening on a global scale, right? There are things that are happening on a global scale, but in an individual way, we are kind of mirroring something back to ourselves right now that I don't think we were able to clearly see in the past 8 years. And that has actually skewed the lens in which we are able to capture ourselves, to see ourselves, to live out our potential and to express who we are into this world, right? Because this is about us being able to express ourselves and how we express ourselves and revolutionizing and radicalizing how we express ourselves, meaning no more playing small, no more holding back, no more keeping a lid on it. It's like there are some massive shifts that are going to be changing within social structures, but it's not just a structure uh, to have this structure be a social structure, you've got to fill it with people. Each of those people is a person, and each person has their own mind and heart and spirit and soul and vessel and ego and fears and all of that. So it's like we are individually navigating some very interesting terrain right now within the nervous system, within our thoughts, and how it translates into our feelings and how those feelings translate into an identity, a belief system, value system over time. But on a global scale, as each of us are going through our own process of this, right? Those of us who are awakened or are awakening, who are on this journey of ever evolving and just always knowing like there's always another layer, there's always another level. We ascend to descend. We ascend in consciousness so that we can descend deeper into our human experience. And that's actually what's so interesting about all of these changes, these big upgrades and these big unfoldings that are happening in the world is that as we are awakening and ascending in consciousness, that ascension actually leads us to have a deeper human experience where I've been doing this work for over 25 years. So what I had felt for so many years in doing this work is that we're constantly trying to transcend the body, we're transcending the ego, we're transcending and persevering our problems, our earth based 3D situations, the material world, what has manifested and materialized in our life. Like it's all an illusion. It's an illusion. Right. But we didn't come here to not be human. We came here to be human. And I think that because of so many different spiritual modalities that have gotten misinterpreted and miscommunicated over time, that it has been interpreted by certain people and groups of people that to be human is to be bad, right? And depending on how you were raised and what you were raised to believe based on spirituality or religion or whatever your culture was, there's many people out there that are like, to be human is to be a sinner, to be bad, like we're always thinking about repenting and atoning and, we have to make ourselves perfect and to be worthy. And we have a lot of fractured I think we have a lot of really fractured ways of viewing the human, and the human is a really extraordinary species, right? Like to be human is to be so diverse and to have feeling and thought and to be able to manifest, to be magical, to be divine, but to also be this individual who's struggling, right? To have hard feelings, to have hard experiences, but that is how we grow and that is how we learn. And this is how we revolutionize our own journey is to recognize where we've come from, really looking at the story that we've been telling ourselves about that, right? Like this is going to be a huge one for most people on an individual level is that we really have an opportunity to rework the story, to look at the story, the narrative that we've been telling ourselves and other people for many years that are actually holding you back from certain things that you want to do because that story will never make it easy for you to do the thing. In fact, the story is what keeps you from doing the thing because it's what anchors you into the past. Uranus is coming through and it's like, we're not telling the story anymore. We're not anchoring into that truth because it's not true. There are many angles, there are many perspectives. It's time to look at this in a different way. It's time to rewire how this exists in your nervous system. And so all of that is actually going to change how we learn, how we grow. I see massive changes in the education system. I feel like the way that we learn and the way that we teach, like there's going to be some massive revolutionizing there. I think what people are going to be gravitating towards learning is going to be quite different than what they thought they had to learn in previous generations. Like there is going to be a massive global shakeup on this, but in the areas of intellect, education, communication, how we connect. And that's the thing. It's like there has been so much separation, and I feel like with this Gemini energy, it's helping us to find connection again. Like I said, mirror, mirror. We're all looking in a mirror every time we look at another person. It depends on what you see in that mirror, though. You're going to see things you don't like. Sometimes you see things that you do like. Sometimes you see things that are very validating to you, right? And so we all have reactions and responses to what is being reflected back to us. And again, this is going to be another way that your nervous system gets rewired. So, what I recommend through I mean, this is an 8-year transit. Oh, phew, phew. Not like over the next couple of weeks. It's really about what I really recommend is you take note of different things that have transpired in your life over the last 8 years, specifically, relationships, associations, social circles, stuff like that. And then also, I would say your finances, if you made any major moves geographically, if you made moves financially, economically, like really look at that though, how it came about, what it felt like for you to kind of navigate those processes. Because, like I said, it's interesting. It was like I had been wanting to buy a house for probably 2 to 3 years before my husband was like, "Okay." He was like, "Yeah, I think we could start thinking about that." And then actually what happened was before we even listed the house, somebody contacted us. "I wanted to buy the house." And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, how do we manifest that?" And then all of a sudden it was like, "Ba, ba, 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 ba," and we found the house and we closed and we moved in. But that was summer of 2018. Right when Uranus was going into Taurus. And so there was financial shifts in our life, like notable financial shifts. There was a change of our geographical location. We moved to a completely different part of the county. So look back on the different things that occurred in that time frame for you. And then looking at your life now, I want you to just kind of note how can you feel certain things shifting in your mind. Do you feel like your direction is starting to kind of change a little bit? Are you noticing that your interests are returning to something that maybe you gave up on before? Do you feel like you're starting to get very passionate about something that you just felt like it just wouldn't happen? Maybe you tried pushing, maybe you tried forcing and adding pressure because you had this feeling like, I just have to do this thing, I just have to go to this place. And then everything just kind of kept falling apart. And now all of a sudden you're like, it's time. It's time, it's time, it's time, it's time. So these are all Uranus and Gemini related things. The last thing that I did want to say though before we go, because I did say that last time Uranus was in Gemini was in 1949. My father was born in 1949. So he is in his Uranus return right now. And so is my father-in-law. And they're all baby boomers. My mom, not so much. She's a few years later than that. But it's like it's interesting because I'm in my opposition, they're in their return, but I did wanna mention that every time Uranus has been in Gemini, there has been a conflict, okay? So, I'm just specifically gonna look at the US because I could look at the whole world, but I'm not going to. So, Uranus and Gemini, and I'm gonna look at my notes because I wrote it down, was Uranus was in Gemini between 1774 and 1782. Okay. So we know that that was the Revolutionary War. Okay. In Gemini, 1859 to 1866. That was the Civil War. We know that it was in Gemini from 1941 to 1949, World War II. So now, present day, what we're looking at is a lot of geopolitical restructuring. Once again, some people are saying, it's not a war, it is a war, it's not a war, it is a war, it's a war. People are bombing each other and bad things. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we're just going to say this is another war, this is a conflict, and it is all in alignment with a lot of the different things that are happening right now astrologically. If you look at patterns and you're watching where certain things were at certain points in history and what was going on, there are some very significant patterns going on right now. So I'm going to leave you with that because it's just very interesting, right? Like how all of these things come about, what tripwires, what triggers these events to take place for people to make certain decisions that they make. Like there is a bigger picture. It's not, there is a lot of ego involved, yes, but then we also have to look at the bigger picture too of what is churning in the skies and how it is guiding and directing us as well. So I hope that this was very helpful to kind of moving through this transit because every time we have these new transits, especially for outer planets that are going to be spending a significant amount of time within a constellation, we're talking about years here. We're not talking, oh, 6 months of Venus, moving through here or Mars or whatever. Those inner planets move much faster. We're talking about years of being in a particular zodiac sign. And so we have adjusting to do. There's going to be some more adjustments that come over time. And so allow yourself to really explore and get very curious. That curiosity, that Gemini energy of like, I'm very curious about this. I kind of want to know more about that. I kind of want to dig around here and investigate this a little bit more. This is exactly what your Venus and Gemini wants. And this is the best way for you to actually navigate this transit. So please subscribe, leave a comment, something for me to respond to that I can actually support you more in your process. And if people leave enough comments about certain things that you might be navigating, this is just more inspiration for me to create and share more trainings and videos. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day.